This week on Bitcoin Backstage,
charging Celsius's founder and CEO, Alex Mashinsky.
We mine deep on the presidential candidate's Bitcoin stance. Then we caught up with Vivek Backstage, where we talked about the Federal Reserve. Alex Mashinsky, the founder and former CEO of bankrupt cryptocurrency lender Celsius Network, was arrested and charged with fraud.
Orchestrating a scheme to defraud customers of Celsius through a series of false claims about the fundamental safety and security of the Celsius platform.
Mashinsky, 57, was charged with 7 criminal counts, including securities fraud, commodities fraud, and wire fraud. Prosecutors and federal regulators accused Mashinsky of misleading customers and of artificially inflating the value of his Hoboken, New Jersey-based company's crypto token.
And for participating in a scheme with Celsius's chief revenue officer, Ronnie Cohen-Pavone, to inflate the price of Celsius's proprietary token, CEL.
So the bankrupt crypto exchange agreed to pay a $4.7 billion settlement with government regulators, making the settlement one of the largest in FTC's history. Meanwhile, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are preparing to strike a blow against the US dollar dominance by planning to introduce a new trading currency that will be backed up by gold. But the US has nothing to fear, according to what the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said during a press conference in China.
I think the United States can rest assured that the dollar is going to play the dominant role in international and serving as a reserve currency in the years ahead. I don't see that role being threatened by any development.
Although Yellen defended the US dollar's dominance, Jim Rogers believes that the large amount of debt and money printing cannot be ignored.
The U.S. has been on top for a while, but now, as I said, we are the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We will not let the U.S. dollar stay neutral. Now we're using it as a political or an instrument of war. So that means nobody in his right mind who thinks they might cross the U.S. someday is going to want to use U.S. dollars.
But that's not the only currency Brazil is getting their hands on. By 2024, the country's central bank aims to launch its own digital currency, so they will use a private version of the Ethereum blockchain in a different way because they modified it so they can create unlimited new coins, freeze accounts, and take money out of the accounts. Meanwhile, Senators Cynthia Lummis and Kirsten Gillibrand have updated their bill from last year to add more regulations to the U.S. cryptocurrency industry.
The most important goal of this legislation was to create safety and soundness, to create consumer protections, transparency, accountability, and certainty. When we met with industry leaders, they basically said, we just need to know what the rules of the road are.
The updated bill includes rules for companies to keep client assets separate, have outside custody of assets, advertise honestly, and show that they can cover customer balances. Officially, as of July 12, 2023, the SEC officially acknowledged Bitwise's spot Bitcoin ETF application. Historically, this is the furthest a spot Bitcoin ETF application has gone in the process. Exactly 1 year ago, Bitwise's last ETF application was rejected, and now Bitwise's latest filing was on June 15, right after the asset management giant BlackRock submitted theirs. So does this actually mean that the SEC is about to approve Bitcoin spot ETFs? I guess only time will tell. And in recent weeks, Bitcoin mining difficulty reached an all-time high of 53.91 trillion units after the latest difficulty adjustment on July 12th. Meanwhile, miner selling has peaked, and some analysts suspect that the lack of miner accumulation has likely restricted an uptrend in the Bitcoin price. Hence, why we might reach 32K. 2024 campaigns are getting spicy, and not because we're having some rivalry boil up between two aging men who faced off in 2020, President Biden and former President Donald J. Trump, but because out of the 16 candidates, we have 4 that are pro-Bitcoin and 2 anti-crypto. So let's dive deeper. For starters, we have the first candidate who announced his pro-Bitcoin stance in the one and only Bitcoin conference in Miami.
As president, I will make sure that your right to hold and use Bitcoin is inviolable.
Not only is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pro-Bitcoin, he actually owns the digital currency. An article came out saying that he owns between 3 to 8 Bitcoin, which is valued between $100,000 to $250,000. He also made history by being the first candidate to accept Bitcoin donations.
Our campaign will be the first presidential campaign in history to accept Bitcoin donations through the Lightning Network.
The following day, Vivek Ramaswamy followed Kennedy's initiative to accept Bitcoin donations. He views Bitcoin more as welcome competition to the US dollar, and he will actually be the first millennial to run for office as a Republican.
As a 37-year-old, I'm the first millennial ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Vivek says he's here to make some changes.
What I've said is I'm in this to actually put the Federal Reserve back in its place, to restore the single mandate of stabilizing the U.S. dollar as a unit of measurement.
Not only that, but also wants to pardon Julian Assange, the co-founder of WikiLeaks, who is wanted in the U.S. over the publications of hundreds of thousands of classified military documents.
Assange is an easy case. Assange is a pardon. I would pardon Julian Assange.
Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida, has officially thrown his hat in the 2024 United States presidential ring and has notably promised to protect the king of crypto, Bitcoin, if he gets the job.
You have every right to do Bitcoin. The only reason these people in Washington don't like it is because they don't control it. And they're central planners, and they want to have control over society.
DeSantis also spoke during a Twitter space with Elon Musk, opposing anti-Bitcoin legislation in Congress.
The current regime, clearly, they have it out for Bitcoin, and if it continues for another 4 years, they'll probably end up killing it.
And underlined his stance against central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
So we were the first state just last month. We actually got the Florida legislature to pass a law that says Florida does not recognize central bank digital currency.
As the Florida governor, he passed laws in Florida prohibiting the use of federal CBDC as money and banned the use of foreign CBDCs. He's also rallied against the Federal Reserve's FedNow 24/7 instant payment system, claiming it's a CBDC forerunner. Another Republican that is bullish on Bitcoin and actually accepts his salary in Bitcoin is Francis Suarez. He's the first candidate that gets paid in Bitcoin, the first to put Satoshi's white paper on the website, and to allow his employees to get paid in Bitcoin. I do gotta say, he is practicing what he's preaching.
It's a vision based on taking advantage of these generational opportunities. And yes, there are some pro-Bitcoin candidates, but they're not pro-Bitcoin candidates that have the record that I have of utilizing Bitcoin and utilizing the blockchain as a way to create prosperity for their citizens. And I'll tell you this, how interesting would it be if the president of the United States, this is something I talked about in the Bitcoin conference, took his salary in Bitcoin? How revolutionary would that be?
Joe Biden, anti-crypto. He sees no fundamental value and has openly rallied against perceived crypto tax loopholes and even opposed a debt ceiling agreement with Republicans, as he claimed it protected wealthy tax cheats and crypto traders. Let's not forget his March 2022 executive order culminated with the first framework for crypto. He's called for a 30% tax on crypto mining electricity usage, doubling capital gains taxes, and cracking down on crypto wash sales. Another Bitcoin hater is Trump. The former US president has said crypto may be fake and is a disaster waiting to happen.
Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam. I don't like it because it's another currency competing against the dollar.
During his presidency, Trump targeted crypto use in financial crimes and allegedly told his Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, to go after Bitcoin in a conversation on trade sanctions against China. As of right now, RFK is the only Democratic pro-Bitcoin presidential candidate, with 3 pro-Bitcoin candidates running on the Republican side. But with Bitcoin now being put as an issue in the presidential race, Perhaps it will give Bitcoiners a chance to just simply vote orange. We caught up with Vivek Backstage, where we talked about the Federal Reserve. So I wanted to know, how would you approach the Bitcoin industry as a president?
Hands off. You know what? What I love about the Bitcoin community is it doesn't want any special favors. Fine, then no special punishments in return either. You've got this excise tax they're talking about now, specifically for energy used for mining purposes. That doesn't quite make sense. Not only does not quite make sense, think about what it would require. It requires a surveillance state in order to actually implement it. Freedom of money goes hand in hand with other freedoms, including freedom of speech. And so the way I would look at it is get the government out of your hair so that you're actually able to hold our feet to the fire. The fact that a lot in the government are worried about the rise of Bitcoin or whatever reflects their own insecurities. When in fact, I think if you're self-confident, if you actually have good self-confidence as a country, you embrace the competition rather than hiding from it.
And how do you view the Federal Reserve affecting the dollar, impacting the dollar?
The Federal Reserve has contributed to a volatile dollar. They've completely abandoned stability of the U.S. dollar, instead trying to play financial god, solving for inflation and unemployment, hitting two targets with one arrow, done a disastrous job of both. What I think they need to go back to is stabilize the dollar as a unit relative to a basket of commodities. Kind of like the equivalent of the gold standard, except rather than just using gold, use a basket of commodities. That helps GDP growth because capital tracks the most efficient projects if the dollar itself is not volatile. I don't need 23,000 employees in the Federal Reserve to do that. Fewer than 2,000 would actually get that job done. So that's what we need, is a 90% headcount reduction at the U.S. Federal Reserve. Put the Fed back in its place, stabilize the U.S. dollar as a unit of measurement, and don't do anything else. No ordinary American should even know the name of who runs the U.S. Federal Reserve. It should be a position that's actually as clerical as that. That's exactly what it needs to be.
That's awesome. And how do you think you're going to educate the governors and the people inside, behind the scenes, about Bitcoin?
I think it can be behind the scenes. I think it has to be in front of the scenes, or else they're not responsive to it. So this actually has to be bottom up. So the education that I think actually matters is actually bottom up education of everyday citizens and participants in the financial system. Governors or anybody else, they're not going to pay attention unless they feel like their feet is held to the fire when it comes to accountability by way of re-election, etc. And so one of the things that I view as my responsibility to do, understanding the role of the corruption of our system of fiat money, the corruption of the Federal Reserve, is to elevate that to the forefront of the debate, even in the Republican primary and the Republican presidential process. Once you do that, then the other candidates can't hide. And so I expect to do that in the debate stage starting this fall.